Welcome, boys and girls. Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Gavin, and I'm going to be reading Lion Taming for Beginners by A. Campbell Ballatine. "Loon," said leading aircraftman Smithers J.C. "Look who's here, would ya?" He stooped, half squatting, and tenderly patted the little sand-coloured kitten's head. He was rewarded by a feline smile and a parting of the lips that might have meant, "Good morning, chum," or perhaps, "Boy, am I ever in trouble?" "What's the matter?" Smithers inquired. "Hungry?" He took the tiny ball of tawny fluff into his arms. "We'll introduce you to the cook." L.A.C. Smithers had a permanent duty at his Air Force station in North Africa. He served with the devotion of an artist and the diligence of a scientist, punctually in arriving at his place of employment, which was the septic tank, was a point of probity with him. But this morning he had even a few more minutes than usual to spare. Time enough to call at the cookhouse on his way. As a rule, Smithers was not welcome in the cookhouse. Not infrequently his appearance had been the cause of some mass panic and cries of, "Get out of here!" It was not that he was in himself an undesirable character, but simply that because of his occupation it was thought that his working clothes exuded the effluvia of his calling. But just now he glowed with the reflected warmth of the attention bestowed on his little pet as cooks, dishwashers, hewers of wood, drawers of water, and peelers of potatoes gathered around. "Blimey," observed Higgins, the sergeant cook. "A young lion, what? Where'd you get him?" "Guess he's lost his mother," Smithers conjectured, beaming with almost paternal love upon his treasure. "More like his mother's lost him," Higgins suggested. It did appear likely. Terrified by the roar of the low-flying plane, the mother lioness might have fled from the strange winged monster with the intention of returning later for her cub. When the youngster became hungry, he went foraging for himself and wandered into the RAF station, almost on the edge of the inhospitable Sahara. Homeward at evening, little Grey's ploughman plodding his weary way, L.A.C. Smithers had almost forgotten his little protege until he found the cub trying to scale the 6-inch step of the Hut K, where he and 11 other airmen spent most of their off-duty hours. The name Buster was immediately attached to him. Smithers fed him with milk from the kitchen and shielded him from the sins of the flesh, to which he was exposed by unscrupulous airmen who offered him beer. Although he soon became the station mascot, Buster was universally recognized as Smithers' kitten. Buster himself, though not unfriendly to the rest of the troops, attached himself with touching affection to Smithers, whom he welcomed boisterously whenever they were reunited. Morning and night he was taken for short strolls, and at less regular hours during the daytime. In the beginning he was escorted by his master, but as he grew bolder, an open door seemed to invite him into the outside world unattended. At first he left the hut very cautiously, after tumbling 2 or 3 times down the precipitous height from the doorstep to the ground, but he quickly gained confidence. Besides, such heights became less formidable, for the cub was growing, in wisdom and in stature, and in favour for the troops, but not with the commanding officer, although the CO continued to tolerate the lion's unauthorised presence, even at the expense of the troops' rations. After all, if they didn't mind going short by, say, 1/4 of an ounce of meat per man per day, why should he complain? But the CO was less indulgent by the time the cub had grown to full lionhood and occupied as much cubic footage as the sanitary regulations allowed for 2 airmen. Furthermore, with no training in such duties, the lion had become an efficient watchdog, growling whenever anyone entered who was not one of the regular tenants of Hut K. If he failed to frighten off the intruder by such hostile gestures, Buster would rise and roar at the top of his lungs. It was not until the mascot had thus assumed the offensive against the CO at a Saturday morning inspection that the latter suggested that the lion ought to be destroyed, turned loose on the desert, or otherwise liquidated without further delay. Smithers simply said, "Very good, sir," but he saw to it, with the connivance of the rest of the troops, that any given moment thereafter the lion was always somewhere the CO was not. These efforts at concealment, however, were not completely successful. "I thought I told you," said the CO to Smithers one day, that your lion had to be got rid of. Oh, yes, sir, Smithers said. Well? Well, sir, I've took him out on the desert, sir. Even took him out on a jeep and ditched him. But he always came back. Then I suppose, the CO suggested, we take him up in a kite and drop him. Smithers felt a catch in his throat. No, sir, not that. Well, if you can think of any more humane way of getting rid of the damned thing. Very good, sir, Smithers said. It was long after midnight, but the station was alert and awaiting the arrival of a giant plane that was to bring the air marshal from London on a hurried inspection trip of African stations. The white beams of many floodlights illuminated the runway. Control had just reported the approach of a plane, and the monotonous droning of 4 motors was already vibrating the air when the terrible thing happened. At leisurely pace, an enormous lion walked out into the centre of the spotlight, lay down, stretched its limbs luxuriously, and seemed to be preparing for sleep. After the initial gasp of astonishment, some of the troops dared to laugh, but the CO was fuming with rage. The hum of the approaching motors had risen to a roar, and navigation lights were circling the sky, like the gleaming eyes of a bird of prey. Where the hell's Smithers? The CO shouted. But the amateur lion tamer was not to be found. Somebody, thundered the CO, boot that animal off the runway and out of the camp. No one moved, and the CO's voice rose, choked with indignation. Tell Control to delay landing, and someone kick the beast off. The plane could be seen withdrawing at request. The lion seemed to decide against his first idea of sleep. Instead, he rose, settled on his haunches, and proceeded to wash his face in the manner familiar to every cat. The CO was jumping mad, waving his arms to express the murderous thoughts for which he had no words. At last, he stepped boldly into the lighted area, walked up to the lion, and delivered it a kick in the hindquarters that must have been heard even in the cockpit of the returning plane. "Ooh!" the troops gasped in mixed astonishment and admiration. No less astonished, the lion rose, looked offended at the CO, and walked slowly into one of Africa's darkest nights. The CO, obviously conscious that his prowess had not been unnoticed by the troops, walked out of the arena like a victorious gladiator. "Runner!" he called. "Hi, sir," a voice answered from the sidelines. "Tell Control to give 'em the green light now." "Very good, sir." Meanwhile, the VIP plane had been hovering over the scene, its navigating lights describing circles against the blackness, its engines droning languidly, impatiently awaiting permission to land. Suddenly the drone broke into a roar, the lights retreated, circled in a descending pattern toward the landing field, and the huge bomber came angrily down the strip. While a landing ramp was being brought into position, the commanding officer and his adjutant advanced to greet the distinguished visitor. They saluted smartly. The air marshal raised a forefinger to the peak of his cap in frigid acknowledgement. "Good evening, sir," said the CO. The air marshal grunted witheringly. "Good, morning. Are you the commanding officer?" "Yes, sir." "Your name?" "Johnson, sir." "Johnson, eh? Why the devil did you have to keep us hanging in mid-air? You know I was coming, didn't you?" "Terribly sorry, sir. We were having a spot of trouble with the lights." "Hadn't you checked them?" Oh, never mind. We'll discuss that in the morning. Now show me to my quarters. I hope you haven't forgotten that." At 9 o'clock the next morning, while the air marshal was still sleeping peacefully, LAC Smithers, JC, was up before the commanding officer. Having pounded his desk savagely 3 times, the CO said, "Haven't I told you, Smithers, to get rid of your lion?" Yes, sir," Smithers admitted. "Why didn't you?" "I don't know, sir. He wouldn't go." "Well, after last night's frightful incident, I'm not telling you any more. The air marshal is terribly annoyed." Yeah, I'm sorry, sir." "As luck has it," the CO went on, "the beastly creature has gone forever. Let's pray. But Smithers, I'm warning you, If it ever comes back, it'll be shot at sight. Shot, Smithers. You understand? Yes, sir, but... There are no buts about it, Smithers. I won't tell you again. No, sir, but, sir, weren't my lion. Mine was locked up in my hut.